Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I painted Domitan's Storm Coven to a tabletop ready standard using some really quick and easy painting techniques. And the plan here was to get this awesome set from Underworlds ready so they'll fit in with my Stormcast Eternals army that I painted in exactly the same way. I'd like to say a massive thank you to the Bald Orc who sent me this set to build and paint for you here. It was great to get an email from him letting me know that he'd like to send them out, and all he wanted was a shout out in return, so happy to do that. And if you want to check out the link in the description down below, that'll take you to the Bald Orc's eBay shop where you can pick up all your single miniatures. And he's not a scalper, obviously I wouldn't be promoting that here on the channel, but it's a great way if you want to pick up just an individual model from some of the sets, maybe for Warcry or some other games you like to play that aren't Warhammer, then I think it's a really good way to do that. But here's Domitan's Storm Coven, and this is a great little set. I really wanted to get these models, but I didn't want to buy the whole box, so it's really cool to hear from the Bald Orc. And now I can share them with you here on the channel, give you a good close-up look at the sprue, then I'll get them built, get them primed, and I'm going to show you the paint recipe I use and exactly how I got all my Stormcast Eternals painted up and ready to play in no time. So first of all, just snipped everything off the sprue, getting as close as I can to all the different components, trimmed them away, and then on some of the bits like the cloaks you can't get the entire sprue off, so then I just use a little hobby knife and I just scrape away and smooth down all the surfaces, so that's going to be ready to paint. Then when it's time to assemble, I just snip some of the pegs from inside the models. I find you get a nice better seal if you do that. Then I put the glue on. I love using this glue, the Tamiya glue. It's perfect for things like this. I'll put a link in the description for that too, and then glue it all together. And by getting rid of those pegs on the inside, you get a nice seal. But I do leave the pegs on things like the arms, and then when I put that on, it's going to be exactly in the right place. And there we go, so I've glued all three models now, assembled them all, and they're ready to get primed up. These look awesome. I'm so happy that the Bald Orc reached out, because having these models now, really cool, and I'll be using them as proxies in my Stormcast Eternal army. I also want to use them in Warcry. I think they'll be fun in that. The only game I'm not going to use them in is Underworlds, but they're going to be brilliant proxies in Age of Sigmar. I can't wait to get them on the table and give them a go. I'm trying to put more wizards, I think, into my army at the moment, so this is going to be a really nice addition. Normally I'll prime with the airbrush, I'll put a link down below to that as well, but I've got this great paint from Aldi, very cheap, it's just a few pounds, and this is great if you just want to do a few models at a time, don't want to get the airbrush set up, make sure your nozzle's nice and clean, and then just take it outside, and with nice even strokes back and forth, just going to spray, doing thin layers, building those layers up until you've got a nice black finish, and then with this paint I leave it overnight so it really does set and cures perfectly. Then, after 24 hours, you're left with a really nicely coated model and you're good to go. Again, if you're doing an airbrush, I'd still leave it 24 hours because the primers I use do say to leave it that long for best results. First paint then is Dark Reaper, a Citadel layer paint, and I usually use a very vegan makeup brush to do some dry brushing with, but in this case I'm going to go for this terrain brush from Army Painter, just because I want it to be a little bit wider rather than round and fat, and I'm going to go with a dry brush technique, add in some paint to my brush, working it into some bristles on some cardboard, and that's going to get the paint right in there, really working it in, and then I'll try and get as much paint as I can off onto that cardboard before moving on to the model. And then I'm going to go with downward strokes first and just be careful at first so I know how much paint is going to come off. Sometimes a little bit too much can come off at the beginning, so just get used to how much is actually on that brush, and then working downward strokes I'm going to catch all those raised areas and give them a nice hit of this dark colour, and then I'm trying to leave that dark black in as many of the recesses as possible, but then once I'm happy I'm getting a bit rougher and building that up. Then when it's dry I go for another Thunderhawk blue paint. This is another layer paint, and I'm going to do the same thing but be a little bit gentler now, again trying to pick out those raised areas, using my brush strokes from the top of the model down. You can see not as rough as before with that first paint. Now onto a base paint, Celestra Grey, a little blue to this. I don't clean my brush in between these stages either, and so you can see it comes a little bit bluer than that Celestra Grey from the colours before. And now I'm being really careful because if this comes off too heavy, it's going to be a little bit too bright, but I'm just building it up, taking my time, working around the model. I might go around 2 or 3 times over the model till I'm happy. I'm putting a little bit more paint on the grip of the trident there, but as far as the cloak goes and the rest of the model, I'm being really careful and really gentle with this. And then we're going to come to those sections again there, working it in, trying not to get where the shadow would cast down. And now it's time for the final dry brush of White Star by Two Thin Coats. This is my favourite white paint. It's so good. And then I'm going really, really, really careful now, just catching the very uppermost edges of everything, the very edges of the cloak there, the hands, and then trying to catch as much of that grip as I can without going over the model too much. And then I'm just going to work my way, taking my time. I'm also going to go all over the base, quite heavy with this white actually, because then that's almost like a zenithal prime going on it. The whole thing is like a zenithal prime really, but just being a little bit careful with the white so you don't put too much on there. And then we've done the dry brushing stage. So now once we get it to look like this, we'll let it dry completely, which really is almost immediate in this technique, and then we'll move on to a shade. I've gone with Coilia Green shade, and this is going to be really nice over that black and all the green blues that we've done up. So you're almost going to get a turquoise effect overall, but it's going to be very dark and rich. You could use lots for this. You could use Dragonhof Nightshade if you wanted something a bit more blue. That works really nice, but I wanted something just a little bit turquoisey because that's going to contrast really nice with the orange that I'll be putting on the base later on with the autumn theme. So you can see really generous, nice thick coat. I'm going over all the model here. I'm trying to avoid the grip though, if I can, of the trident. While that's drying, we'll take some contrast Militarum Green, and this is the colour I'm going to use on the terrain, and this will match with my Warcry terrain as well, so same colour I used on all those rubble and ruins. Then I'll take contrast Wildwood, a nice dark brown, and I'm going to go over everything that isn't a piece of the masonry there, so give that base a nice coat. Wait for everything to dry, then take that Celestra Grey again, and I'm just going to go over the trident handle because I want that to not be so dark because we're going to put a different colour on that in a moment. And I also just paint the part of the head that is exposed. Most of this is a mask, but there is part of the bald head that you can see. Then I take base Rune Lord Brass. I don't want to go too bright in the gold department, so I chose this for my army. And I'm going to go over all the gold parts of the model, so completely over the mask there, picking out all those areas, also on the trident as well. At first I went all gold on it, but really it was a bit too much. We'll correct that later. Next is Contrast Volupus Pink, and now I go nice coat all over the trident handle and then work it into all those recesses, and by going over it with that grey earlier, that's going to make the pink stand out a little bit more. Then it's base Lead Belcher, a good solid metal paint here, and I go over everything that I want to be silver. And then on the trident I felt it was a little bit too much gold, so I'm just going to give one coat over that gold paint that I used, the Rune Lord Brass. Then when that's dry, I take a Guilliman Flesh. I didn't film that one pot paint, but this is a contrast paint, Guilliman Flesh. And then I'm going to go over everything that I painted in that brass colour. This is going to give it like a shade, but it's also going to give it a little richer look to it. But you could just put Guilliman Flesh over Lead Belcher for a brass effect. That works really nicely too. Then keep going, give all that metal a nice coat, and then move on to Ushabti Bone, and then going to go back to dry brush technique here using that cardboard, but a smaller brush. And then I'm going to go over everything that I painted with that Militarum Green, and that's just going to highlight all the little bits of rubble and masonry. Now on to some Nuln Oil shade, and this will go over all the Lead Belcher, but also the Volupus Pink that we painted. So give that a nice coat, be quite generous with this Nuln Oil, and that's going to really define all the little rivets and everything. Then a layer Cadian Flesh Tone once that's completely dry, and be very careful here, very, very gentle dry brush over the Volupus Pink. Then onto layer Stormhost Silver, more dry brushing now. This time I've picked a different brush that's a little bit smaller, but it's very soft, so I can be really careful here. And now I'm going to go over all the metal. Anything I painted Lead Belcher and anything I painted with the brass as well, and just give that a coat. Be careful not too much comes off though. Then I take a technical paint Waystone Green. I get a nice little blob on the end of my brush, and I'm going to pick out any gems on the model, and then that'll give it a real nice green look. And I do this after I've dry brushed to get the full effect. And there you go, you can see it on the headpiece too. Now onto the base, and I'll put a link to the basing video at the end of this one, but I'll quickly show you how I've adapted it to fit with these Underworlds models using this Thick Mud by Vallejo and Green Stuff World Autumn Leaf Litter. This stuff is fantastic, and I'll put links down below to these too. So what I'm going to do here is just go over all the areas of brown with some of this thick mud. And I've been quite generous here, putting a nice amount on and just work my way around the model, picking out all the spots. And then once it's covered and wet still, I'm going to put the leaf litter all over it. And I'm being quite generous, getting it right on. And I'm also going to just tap it down to make sure it sticks. And I don't want to do this too roughly because I want the leaves to come out and be pronounced a little bit. But just making sure that they're set in that mud. Because when it's set, they're going to be glued in place by the mud. Then, while it's all still wet, I take some Gamer's Grass garden flower set. This whole range is fantastic. Again, links down below to it all. But I'm going to choose some pink and purple. And then I'm just going to find a spot where I think it will look right. Usually next to a rock, but not always. And then pop it down, use that little tool, and just really push it into that mud. Again, that's going to help it stick. Then I take base Abaddon Black and give 2 coats all around the rim. And that's all there is to it. That's the whole recipe, including the base, for how I painted my Stormcast Eternals and the Domitan Storm Coven to a battle-ready standard, and hopefully you can see just how easy this is. It literally is dry brushing a shade, picking out the details, but then spending a little bit of effort on the base to really make up for the limited amount of time you've spent on the model itself. And my goal here is to get something that looks really nice on the table. You're not going to be up close to it like this in most cases. You're going to be a few feet away from it most of the time. So as long as it kind of stands out and you've got a nice contrast between the base and the model, and then you've got the highlighted metals that will really pop when the light hits it, I think you're good to go. And for me, the key is to get things painted quickly and on the table so I can play with them. That's really important. And I like to do batch painting, so I did all 3 models here at the same time. When I did my Stormcast army, I painted all the models you can see here in one go, and then I painted Krondis and the Stormdrake Guard afterwards. So altogether, I worked it out and timed it, doing lots of different sessions, but it took 24 hours to get 3,000 points, painted and based. So using these techniques really helps to get models on the table quickly, and I think they look cool. Again, you're going to be a few feet away from them, and I think the effect really works on the tabletop. But those leaves really do kick it off. And using the Vallejo thick mud is a really great option, just so fast, so effective, and then with some gamer grass, flowers and shrubs on top, you can't go wrong. I hope you found this video helpful and it gave you an idea of how you could paint your Stormcast Eternals just a little bit differently. They don't have to be bright gold. I didn't want a whole gold army and I just wanted something quick and easy. So hopefully this is going to give you some inspiration to try something a little bit different. You know you're not going to win any prizes for painting doing it in this way, but it does get you from the box to the tabletop really quickly. A massive thank you to the Bald Orc again for sending these out. It was really cool of him to reach out, and I really appreciate it. Hopefully you'll go and check out his eBay shop, link in the description down below. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to my sponsors this month, especially Phoenix Performance Coaching for sponsoring the new series on preparing for your Warhammer tournaments. Look out for the next episode of that coming real soon. And if you're looking for any Warhammer or other game products for your hobby, check out Element Games. You can save up to 20% there. And you'll be supporting me here on the channel as I get a small commission for every sale made. So thanks so much if you take a look. It'd be awesome if you could check out those links to the sponsors. A huge thank you to you for watching today's video. Hope you enjoyed it and hope it gave you a good idea about how you could get your models painted up really quickly to a tabletop ready standard. If you did like the video, it'd be awesome if you hit the like button. Consider subscribing as well if you've been enjoying the videos recently. And I look forward to seeing you here next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters for helping me to keep going with these regular videos. I couldn't do this without you, and I appreciate your support so much. If you'd like to join the Patreon community, support the channel, get some great perks at the same time, there's a link down below in the description. It'll be awesome to see you there.